I wish you well. I hope you're okay, and welcome. And this is a cup of tea. This is actually a near perfect cup of tea. The only thing missing is that there isn't a crisis. I'm glad. A good cup of tea is what you want after a crisis, and occasionally you get the perfect cup of tea which suits your expectations. There is no crisis. Just finished my French. That might have been a crisis for them. It wasn't a crisis for me. Well, a good cup of tea, to make a good cup of tea, what you need is ley lines to come together in the same spot, the universe and stars to come into alignment, and planets. And it occasionally does occur, and I'm not talking about wibbly wobbly astrology or tarot or anything. I'm talking about sometimes in an infinite universe, a cup of tea will be perfect exactly at the moment you want it. Okay? I know nothing, so other than I know how to make a good cup of tea. So life, cup of tea, this cup of tea comes with a small print. The small print is simple, and it's one you're able to educate yourself to. Not all small print on contracts in life are known, and we can be ignorant to just move through life without even recognizing that there is small print there and it's valuable, and really we should have worked it out or actually read it. Tea, the perfect cup of tea must always be begun hot, and it must be finished hot. Okay? If you don't do that, if somebody interrupts you, it happened all the time when I used to work, and I used to dream about having a hot cup of tea beginning and finishing it, but people come in needing help with various situations, and you did your best, and you came back and the perfect cup of tea was cold. And the small print, you get a cup of tea hot, you drink it hot, nobody gets in your way, nobody. Okay, apart from crisis in friends and helping people in dire distress. But other than that, you start your cup of tea and you finish it. I'm growing tomatoes, and tomatoes are thriving as plants. They're green and some yellow flowers on them, and there will some small tomatoes coming through. There's a contract between you and the tomatoes, and there is small print. So the small print on that one is quite simply, you must plant me at the right time in order to get fruit at the right time. Tomatoes are fruit, I'm sure you knew that. If you plant them too early and you don't have a heated greenhouse, here we don't, or a heated pad, here I don't, and you propagate them in a propagator inside your house, and you do it in early March, late February, early March, which is where the television experts tell us would be the best place to do it. But what I have learned over the years, I've spotted the small print that comes along with the contract between me and tomatoes. I have to grow them at the right time, hoping that spring weather will be warm and not cold, not freezing, which can happen. And as soon as they start growing, about that big, with decent leaves, I can then transplant them into a pot in the greenhouse, and they will survive. And living in this country, there's another bit of small print, is that if you haven't put in at the right time, let's say you have put them in at the right time, and they're in a greenhouse, and it's been a mild spring, and then it's a horrible cold summer, and you arrive in August, and the tomatoes are grown, but they're not yet ripe. You'll never get them. You have to realize that everything has to be done in a limited time window, when it's safe to put them, when it's safe to put them out, and hope to high heaven for good weather. You may get an Indian summer, but we haven't seen an Indian summer, and to be perfectly honest with you, compared to my childhood, we haven't even seen a proper summer. So it's a sign of control for me having a cup of tea that is hot. Control my life, control of those moments, a breath, time to reflect, or even time to go void and just think tea. Another one is that in life, the small print on It's not on the ticket when you buy a ticket for travelling by train, but it should be, I suppose. When I did Interrail many years ago, which was on one ticket and you could travel all over Europe, and we did about 21 cities in about 30 to 31 days, and it was marvelous, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. But one thing we learned is that sometimes it doesn't matter how exhausted you are, you have to keep moving. From Vienna onwards to the east, the train you'll take if you're going through the major cities is actually the Orient Express. I'm sure it's still called that, but I'm sure it must be in better conditions than the one we went on. And we learned that there was a small print issue with that one as well. It was fabric. The chairs were benches and they were fabric. Comfortable, very comfortable, but the problem is you stayed in them too long. I'm going to swear. Or you might think I'm swearing. I'm not swearing. But what happens is that your body heat, your bottom's heat, sat there exhausted, sitting probably very badly slumped, will eventually release the smell within the seat. In other words, to misquote Michael Jackson, the fat of 40,000 years will be released and people will come in and think it's you. So one thing we learned, if we were lucky enough, late at night, because we'd slept on trains, then we every couple of days we'd sleep in a hostel in order to get a wash before we were arrested for looking like vagrants. So you learned that doesn't matter how exhausted you were. After about half an hour, you got up and you moved seats, and you kept moving seats. Otherwise, people who would give you a chance that you might be decent don't give you that chance, because they come into compartments and the smell of fat, and because you didn't read in time the small print. We did. We learned it. I'm not even going to cheat on this one. A technical error, and outside it's raining. Horizontal hurricane. It is horrible. I don't know where the cats are. I'm worried about E.T., the elder one, obviously, but there's food in the shelter and there's food in the portico, so I hope she makes it. So this is a technical error recovery, not very good one, obviously. A quick and very relevant aside about Philip Larkin. I think 2022 was his 100, would have been his 100th birthday. I didn't send a card, I didn't know. But I'm talking about Barnsley's Best. I'm thinking about Simon Armitage, who is the Poet Laureate. And marvellous, warm, engaging, kindly conversation, generous, just a lovely man, witty, funny. That's not the first person I saw. It was a program, and it was a documentary about his translation of Homer's Odyssey. And I looked at him and thought, my God, smile, man. And it was an engaging program because he put the Homer's Odyssey in historical context, philosophical context, psychological, you name it. And it was a fascinating listen to. I was put off him by that program, and he seemed a bit dour. I couldn't have been so far away from the target of who Simon Armitage is, because I came across a program in which it's called The Poet Laureate Retires to His Shed. And it is a shed built in his garden with a lovely view, and he invites people there and they discuss life. They discuss life in general, whatever the person's been doing, whether it's a scientist, an artist, whether it's another poet, whether it's a songwriter, singer. It is fascinating because in the shed it is a warm, engaging, kind place. And if you're lucky, he will open one of the Poet Laureate's free bottles of booze, and you get a glass of wine off him. But couldn't be, he's a warm, engaging kind, and he's an incredibly good poet. Anyway, it was a documentary about, with him and various other poetry colleagues. I think the editor of the Times Literary Supplement was there. And we were talking about Larkin, his 100th birthday, and he was going through a short list of his poems. And one of those was about life being a lease, talking about a lease. And a lease, if you take out a lease on a building, then it's for a specific period of time. There's a beginning, there's an end, and there are certain responsibilities you have and certain responsibilities you don't have. It's clearly in there in the small print. But it was bigger subject than that. We're talking about the contract with life and the small print engaged with that about we should be doing, we shouldn't be doing, and also the fact that not many people, or some people, don't even know that there is small print. But the life contract is technically a contract between you and whatsoever. And you've got to work it out. If you're fortunate, then you work it out yourself and you realize that there are certain responsibilities you have to yourself. One of my favorites, obviously, is having time for the perfect cup of tea. So it's an engaging documentary on radio about the poet Philip Larkin. He himself was offered the role of Poet Laureate in 1980 when wonderful, great, another warm, engaging person, superb person, Sir John Betjeman died, and he chose to decline. And I'm so glad actually we got Armitage now, Simon Armitage. So the program is exactly what Gandalf was talking about in Lord of the Rings. You know, you've only got so much time. You know, you've got to choose what to do with it. And you've got to, I think the small print also says that if you're drinking a cup of tea, and it's a hot cup of tea, if it's the perfect cup of tea, or as near as perfect as the universe allows you at this particular moment, then that's what you work on, for you. You can't live your life for others. You have to live your own life for you. And at the end of the day, you reach a certain point, my age, then you realize that maybe those responsibilities, those things, those limitations on what you do for other people, you should be focusing on yourself. That is a real imperative for life. So work it out, and get on with it. I think that's the message that came through, and I'm grateful to Simon Armitage for guiding the conversation that way, which is what it does. So to Barnsley's best. And it reminded me, excuse me, and it reminded me of a line from, I think it's Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd. I think the song is Time, and the line goes, oh gosh, how does it go? Anyway, pretending nothing happened. When you look 10 years have got behind you, no one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. That was written by somebody in their 20s. Okay, they had a middle class education, private education probably. But they're smart enough to realise that there is small print, that it is a contract, it is a lease, and it will come to an end. We all end up in the university of life. Doesn't matter what we do. It's an opportunity for learning and setting rules for ourselves. Being aware that if we're delaying out of laziness and we need to get somewhere, that I can guarantee you that God will send out a tractor, if not more than one tractor, to delay you. And it's your own fault. Because God says in the contract of life I give you, if that is your belief, then it says, do it, get there on time, engage properly, no half measures, or I will send out my tractors and that'll bugger you up. Something like that. Like all members who attend university life, which is all of us, then we all passed with extinction. The lease says there's an end date, and at that point, usually if you look at any lease date, any lease details, what they say is we never negotiate the price down, we always negotiate the price up. I worry that a number of my friends and people I just come across casually, they're happy, maybe it's their choice, their decision in life. They just lean over the railings in the street with the cigarettes and watch life go by. There is a certain desperation in my life to get things done, to achieve simple things that I've always wanted to achieve. They're not great, they're not profound, but they're things I want to do. And I'm aware of the small print on my contract. I've had illness. As a child, I was very, very unwell and had a cancer. Walked away from that one, as my friend said, dodged a bullet there. Now get on with your life. I'm aware of the contract. I'm aware of the time limit. I hope the limit is distanced into the future. but I'm aware of it. So when I've got a cup of tea and I'm thinking, I never let anybody disturb me. A cup of tea, perfect cup of tea for me, occurs when I'm alone. I don't know why, always occurs when I'm alone. And if the phone goes, there's an email, there's a WhatsApp, whatever. If somebody comes to the door, I live in the middle of nowhere. If somebody comes to the door, it's usually worrying, especially if they do it at night. Nobody's ever come to my door at night, so I'm very lucky. Otherwise, I'd be there with a pointy stick, and it might not go well for that person. We live in a time we have so much opportunity to do anything, and the opportunity for self-education even more than ever. We are the best educated population that this country has ever had. Although if you look at some of the decisions people are making, it might not be obvious. So make sure that you start a cup of tea, you finish it. You're aware that tomatoes need to be grown within a specific time period. There's luck involved, but maybe you can mitigate those just by being clever and insulating further. Like me, my greenhouse was broken, damaged very badly with the storms of winter, so I put a small greenhouse inside it, and it seems to be working, and the tomatoes are growing well. Also, if you're being lazy and you need to do something, you need to be somewhere, it's an important appointment, or to be with a friend, if you're late, if you're lazy, if you're disrespectful of the people that you're supposed to be meeting, can't be bothered to be there on time, then God will send out his tractors. And it might be a job interview. And in a job interview, tardiness is something you'll never walk back from. Life is full of small print that we should know about, but we choose to ignore it. Philip Larkin wrote about it, Pink Floyd were aware of it, Richard Feynman was aware of it because he died far too young of a cancer, one I'd never heard of. Finally, our two granddads, they fought in the First World War, they fought in the trenches in the First World War. It's the most appalling, the last most appalling act of massacring your own staff, your own soldiers, ever, I hope. They fought in the trenches, both went to Ireland, unaware of each other at that time. And my father's father, Edward, my mother's father, David, both very young men. They trained in Ireland on the use of Lewis gun. Lewis gun at that time was the best machine gun available to the British Army, a superb gun, which meant you could sweep it and you kill so many people. Both grandfathers. One had been apprenticed in the Marine Yard, the ferry port, Holyhead, not far away from here. And that's Edward, and my grandfather, David, he was an apprentice, he was a farmhand. And some days he'd have to work so hard that he'd fall asleep in the fields and wake up with the cows around him, which is good, I suppose, kept him warm. But there were different summers then. And that's a small print of anything we wish to do, any plans we wish to do about summer these days. I get the impression summer's gone. We don't get summer here anymore. Both grandfathers went to war at an incredibly young age. They were taught to use one of the most vicious weapons ever invented at that time. And they probably used it. And I make no judgment because somebody's trying to kill them or kill their friends. That is the appalling tragedy and reality of war. They came back, and both men. I remember my granddad David. My granddad Edward died before I was born. And the description of both is matching because they're both deeply quiet, reflective men. My father was similar, but his experiences were in the Second World War. It must have been horrible for my grandparents to realise that part of their contract with life was that they'd had to go to war, and the most appalling part of the contract was that their children would have to go to war. 3 children went to war, 3 came back. My father was seriously wounded. We have the telegram. Survived, obviously. Philip Larkin wrote about police. Pink Floyd hints strongly at it. Gandalf directly points to it. You've got so much time, what are you going to do with it? Don't waste it. So, things that you want to do, don't let anybody else interfere with them. Essentially, I think that's the message today. You've got a perfect cup of tea. Nothing on this side of hell or heaven is going to stop you drinking it. And if you give up the pleasure of that cup of tea, then you need to read your own small print about quality of your living. That's it. I haven't got a clue how long that took. Hope it didn't bore you. God's tractors, cup of tea, tomatoes, candles, clogs. And before I go, if you found anything in there that just piqued your interest, beg your pardon, that you can use as a little meme in life. You know, what's the small print on this? What's the small print on that? Contract of life is full of them, and we've got to make sure we realise they're there. So if something did stick and just give you a little moment to think, then before you think too much, give me a like and even subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, and places no obligation on you whatsoever. So you take care, and until the next time, take care. Mm.